Hi there. We're here today to discuss the Indo-Caribbean historical experience as it relates to the British Empire and the experiences that both historically and in the modern age Indo-Caribbean persons have faced as a result of colonization. I'm here today with Miranda Rachel, and she is the founder of Coolie Women, which is a personal education page on social media, which has some excellent content. So she's here today to talk about that page and her own experiences and opinions on this matter. Hi, Miranda.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor, and I'm happy to be here to participate in this discussion with you.
It's a pleasure to have you. So let's get started then. So, what's your background? Who are you? What's your story?
My name is Miranda Rachel Debra, and I am an Indo-Guyanese immigrant, and I am a writer, performer, storyteller, and budding psychotherapist based in New York. And during my immigrant experience as a child, I came to New York with my family when I was about 8 years old. And my immigrant experience has shaped the entirety of my trajectory since then. It's been almost 22 years since we migrated from Guyana. And that's been a pivotal life experience, a life moment that has shaped who I have become today and the work that I do. And so almost everything that I do is informed by my immigrant identity. And it plays a major role in what I have decided to do with my life, which is I am an artist and actor. And one of the things that I love to do, perhaps my greatest passion, is theatrical arts. And I love telling stories and performing them on stage. And in a way, I feel that this continues my ancestral traditions of oral storytelling, which is how we pass down information and tell stories in our families. And I have always loved that. And I have decided to take it further to the stage because I think it allows people to see themselves, to see their narratives. And as a as a historically marginalized and oppressed group, not to mention severely underrepresented in all facets of life, whether it's in the media or in any facet of life. Indo-Caribbeans are just completely shoved to the margins. It is very important to me to increase representation and visibility for my community, for my diaspora, not just the Indo-Caribbean diaspora, but the diaspora of descendants of indenture. And so my work as an artist is to uplift my diaspora, all of us, and to tell our stories and to have our people see themselves in a way that I don't think has been done adequately enough yet for many reasons, a lot of that being how severely we are oppressed and erased from the global narrative. And so that is where my storytelling, my artistry, my acting comes in. I really try to create original works that will not only highlight my story as an immigrant, but extend that to the diaspora. And in many ways, my own immigrant story mirrors that of my ancestors, moving to new land, losing cultural heritage, reclaiming it, creating something new, living in a hybrid identity. So that is how I incorporate. Sorry.
That's all
That
right.
is how I incorporate my my own personal story into my artistry. And I am also a budding psychotherapist. I recently graduated from Columbia School of Social Work and with a master's degree in social work and with a focus on mental health. And my goal with this is to become a licensed mental health practitioner, to begin to address the incredible stigma behind mental health among Indo-Caribbeans and among the Caribbean diaspora as a whole. It is heavily stigmatized, and by so doing, it's a lot of mental health issues and problems go unaddressed among Caribbean people. And it just continues the cycle generation after generation. And I hope that as a budding psychotherapist, that I will be able to start to help our communities heal from the traumas that we are carrying with us for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I plan to do this in collaboration with other mental health practitioners, of course, of Caribbean backgrounds, and to do so in ways that are congruent with our Caribbean culture. One of the things that I'm very intent on is to reject all standards of current social work and mental health practice, which are very much rooted in white supremacist standards. And personally, given my life experience, I have learned that a lot of these standards in place in society that we operate under do not apply to me. And so in the same way, it does not apply to my people. So there is no way I can possibly take mental health practices from the United States or in the Western world and take that back to the Caribbean. It's not gonna work. So my work has been, since graduating, has been finding ways to make mental health practice culturally congruent with our people in a way that they understand it, so that we can first begin to destigmatize it and then implement mental health practice in a way that finally allows our people to release our trauma and to begin to heal, so that for future generations are not carrying this heavy, heavy burden. So that is how my life story has heavily impacted my choices in my career and the things that I do with my life.
Brilliant. So talk us through Coolie Women then. So this is how I came across your work, and this is how many, you've got quite a good following at the minute, which I'm sure will increase. So talk us through that story then. What inspired you to start that page?
Sure, yes. So Coolie Women is an Instagram page that I started in March of this year. And it's a personal educational project. That is how I think of it. And I think of myself as one of its curators. I started this project in collaboration with my younger sister, and we collaborate on ideas and share the information that we find. And it started in March of this year when in the United States, March is Women's History Month. And every year there will be a lot of posts and information all over the internet about notable female figures in history of many different cultures. And it struck me one day, I mean, I've always thought about this for a long time, but something about, I don't know, maybe it's the climate that we live in this year, but something like really struck me this year. And I thought one day, where are the women of my culture? Where are the Coolie women? I know they exist. Where are they? Why don't I know their names? I need to know who these women are, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do without the women that have come before me. I always say I stand on the shoulders of giants. And so I took it upon myself. I thought, okay, well, if someone's gonna have to, like, resurrect the lost women of our Coolie history, then I'm gonna try to do my best, and I'm gonna have to learn that information for myself. And so I started the page as a means for me to learn about women of indentured heritage and to share what I learned. And so it really just started off as a personal project where I was just doing a lot of research for myself to increase my knowledge about, my own culture, my own people, and sharing that. And so I just was going day by day, just researching, different sort of female figures who have indentured heritage all across the diaspora, not just in the Caribbean, but I was really intent on making this page something that didn't just cover Indo-Caribbean women, but women who belong to the indentured diaspora all over the world. Because I know, as an Indo-Guyanese woman, I know what it feels to be marginalized and erased. And knowing that Guyana, Trinidad, Suriname and Jamaica had the most visibility when it comes to talking about indentureship. I thought, well, what about the other countries, of the other nations, the other former colonies that indentured Indians were taken to? And I thought, imagine how much more erased and marginalized they are. I want to also make that space available to them and learn about them, because I don't know about that stuff, you know? And so it really just started off as a means for me to learn for myself. And I don't know what happened. Just somewhere along the line, it just sort of took off and people found the page and were following and sort of just thanking me for sharing this information. And, you know, they were saying things like, I didn't know about this person. I didn't know all of this about my history. You know, thank you for highlighting that. And then I just saw how it became bigger than me. And it became like, I just realized how important it was for this work to be done. And you know, I'm happy to serve in this way. I'm not a social media expert or anything. I'm just curating this in like the simplest way possible, just to distribute information. And the information is out there. It belongs to the diaspora. It is not my information, but it, you know, the work is out there, and I try to credit and source where I find all the information from. And I just share it with the followers and hope that they learn something too. And it's been a really empowering experience, because then I've been connecting with people who care about this, who want to know more about their history. And it's brought me a lot of connectedness with the community, the global diaspora of indentured descendants. It's connected me with them in a way that I have not experienced before. And so it's taken off to new heights, that in a way that I didn't expect. And I'm very, very grateful for all the support it has garnered, because, you know, it was just an idea I had to teach myself, and to see it be so warmly received, it has been very much validating and empowering for me to keep doing this work.
That's brilliant. So you mentioned indentureship, and as you mentioned, with Indo-Caribbean persons being erased from history books, many persons in the modern day are not aware of indentureship. The conversations I've had with persons of South Asian background in particular, they have no idea what indentureship was. Some of my Caribbean friends who are of African heritage are aware, but don't perhaps know the details. So give us a basic summary then. What was indentureship? How did Indians end up in the Caribbean under the system of indentureship?
Sure, yes. As you said, we have been incredibly erased in history. If we haven't been erased, we are made to be a footnote in, you know, in the historical texts. But we are so much more than that. So indentureship was basically the system that replaced slavery once slavery was abolished in the British colonies and the other European colonies. And so that slavery was abolished in the 1800s. And so indentureship officially began in 1838, when they call them Indentured Indians, were taken from India, what was then Hindustan, and taken to the Caribbean and other European colonies across the world. And they were basically the replacement for the labor of formerly enslaved peoples. The Europeans needed labor on the sugar plantations to continue doing the work that the formerly enslaved people refused to do any longer, because they fought for their freedom and they got it. And so Europeans said, okay, we need a replacement. We can't enslave people anymore, but we need cheap labor. And so they found a lot of that labor in India and in other countries like Portugal, China, but primarily India. And the people that they recruited were generally poor or desperate, or, you know, they needed a different life. They were suffering in their homelands, in their villages. And the Europeans took advantage of that and hoodwinked them and told them, we're going to give you a better life. We're going to, you know, we're going to make sure you have better opportunities than you can have in your little village. And so they recruited them and had them sign a contract, usually by fingerprint, because the indentured Indians could not read or write. And so they didn't even know what they were signing. They were just told a story that they were just signing up for a better life, but they could not read. They didn't know what was in that contract. The contracts were called gurmits, which is how the Indentured Indians said agreement, because they didn't speak English, so they said gurmits, and they were later on known as gurmitias. And so they were many of them. It's very, very nuanced, where it is not slavery, and we cannot call it slavery, because in a way they willingly signed a contract. They agreed to it. They voluntarily boarded those boats. The thing is, they didn't know what they were signing up for, and many of them were kidnapped, especially women. They were kidnapped on their ways home, and just told stories about what was going to happen, and they didn't know what was what. And again, many of them were very poor and didn't have many options. Some of them, a lot of women were fleeing abusive households, abusive husbands, and they felt that this was their way out, to just leave, and so they were taken to these new lands and were met with something that they didn't know was coming. And so indentureship, the way that it is distinct from slavery, the conditions were horrible. No one is, we cannot deny that those conditions were horrible, perhaps as horrible as what went on in the days of slavery, but we cannot call it slavery because they were paid, they were housed, they were given things in compensation, as meager as those forms of compensation were. They were given food, and they were given the option that at the end of their contract, they could return to India. The thing was, why would you return to India? Why would you return to a life that was already hard, So they were just kind of like hoodwinked, and like the loophole was, like it was just it caught them from all around. And some of them did return, but when they did return, when they crossed the Kalapani, the Black Waters again, when they crossed it, they were met with disdain from the people they had left as being deserters of their culture. They were rejected, and some of them went back to their villages and had to start all over, and some of them were forced to return back to the colonies because they had nothing left waiting for them back in their homelands. And so they were just caught between a rock and a hard place. It was horrible at both ends. And so the ones who returned to the colonies, the ones who stayed in the colonies and never went back, made a new life for themselves. But in doing so, their lives were very, very hard. And they were stripped of a lot of their culture, a lot of their customs, especially in the British colonies. And I can only speak as a descendant of indentured laborers in a British colony, of formerly British Guyana. We have been stripped so much of our heritage, our culture, our roots. We no longer speak our native tongues of Bhojpuri and Hindi or whatever else they might have spoken. We have lost that. We have one or two words here and there that we will throw into our Creolese conversations. We cannot fluently speak the tongues of our native ancestors. We can't, we've lost that. And for those that were converted from Hinduism or Islam to Christianity, we lost a lot of the culture because we were forced to not speak our language. We were forced to not wear our cultural dress. And, and one of the ways that we've been able to retain our culture is through food. We still cook the same kinds of foods. And a hybrid version of those foods, because obviously they had to adapt with what was available to them in the Caribbean. But it's, especially in the British colony, it's devastating to witness that over 180 years later, since 1838, how much we have lost and how much work descendants of indenture need to put in to reclaim our roots. And in trying to go back to modern day India and find our ancestral villages, it's so hard. The process is insane, Those records that were kept for our ancestors when they arrived in the colonies, they were so badly kept that if you don't have your ancestor's name, you can't find information. But how would you have your ancestor's name if the records are badly kept. It's just this cycle that is impossible. And some people have been able to successfully trace their roots and reclaim some of that, but many have not been and probably will never be able to do so because of the disservice that the British Empire has done to its former colonies. And so that's like a indentureship in a nutshell, and I probably missed a lot of stuff. I'm not an expert, but I'm speaking from what I have learned. But yeah, it's just been devastating. And then to just like live in the body that you're in 2020, and then to recognize the realities of your origins. You know, I always say that people of indentured heritage, our existence is political. We were labor. We were brought in as labor, and our present day hybrid identities, whether we are Indo-Caribbean, Indo-Fijian, Indo-Mauritian, Indo-South African, like wherever we landed, our present day hybrid identities are political, and our existence today is resistance because we have survived all that trauma that was imposed upon us for us to be here today and to still speak of the legacy of our ancestors and to speak of their resilience. And so, you know, I don't ever sugarcoat that. You know, the fact that I am Indo-Guyanese, two different things. People don't even know that Indians exist in the Caribbean, you know, and they're always like, how can you be both? I am both. I am 100% both. I am equally Indian. I am equally Caribbean. You know, there's no either or for me. I am both, and I embrace both. And it is a political identity. And that's how I view it. Others may have differing opinions, and that is 100% valid. Everyone's relationship and journey with their identity is their own, and there is no one size fits all. And this is where I have come to in my own journey. This is how I view myself, my family. And yeah, so that's what it is in a nutshell.
So what would you say has been the biggest legacy of the British Empire upon the former Caribbean colonies, or Guyana specifically?
I would say their biggest legacy is destruction. Just the destruction that they have left in their wake. Every time I go back to Guyana, I can only speak as a Guyanese. Every time I go back to Guyana, I see the remnants of colonialism and indenture in my village, in my grandmother's village in Georgetown, in the streets that we drive through. It is there. This is living history. It is not in the past, you know. The village that I visit, where my grandparents live, it is a former plantation. All of that land are former plantations. You just don't erase that. You can't like say like, okay, now that we're living on the land in houses and we're building up, that this land is not plantation. It's still plantation land, you know. People's blood, sweat, and tears is in that land. And if you drive through Georgetown, all those colonial wooden buildings are still up. There's a big statue of Queen Victoria in front of one of the buildings, in front of the courthouse, I believe. And it's just jarring. It's really jarring that those remnants are still up. I mean, it's good for historical purposes so that we can know what happened to us. But when you just see the fact that there is severe poverty in the former British colonies is a testament to how they just left us high and dry, destroyed people's lives, and then just when Indentureship ended in 1917, and even then it was still like going on for a few years after that, you know, it was like, where are the, you know, like they just sort of left the colonies and then left the people that they kidnapped and stole to fend for themselves, and then divided the majority Indians and Africans, particularly in Guyana, against each other. They have pitted us against each other. And so that's what I would say is their biggest legacy: the destruction of people's lives and the destruction of the idea of unity, that they would pit two oppressed peoples, Africans and Indians, against each other in order for them to further benefit. And that to me is just, it's so clear every time I return back home.
So if we talk about the decolonization process, Because obviously, you know, for many people, they make the argument that this happened a long time ago. What are you still complaining about? But obviously, you've talked about that there are still very vivid and real monuments and examples all around Guyana that show that this was not just a thing of the past, that the legacy is very much there. So that would suggest that there has to be a decolonization process that takes place. What does that look like in your opinion? Or what should that look like?
For me, and I don't have the answers because I'm in my own decolonization process, and it's going to be ongoing until I leave this earth. It doesn't stop. But I think for me, the one of the first thing that always needs to be done is education. We have to educate ourselves about our history, and that is not being done. And yes, people want to move on from it, especially people in the Caribbean. And I get it because it's so painful to look back, especially among older generations and even younger ones who just feel like they want to move on with their lives. They don't want to have this thing hanging over them, this pain, you know, this trauma. And I 100% get that. But for me, as just thinking from a therapeutic background, you cannot heal and you cannot move on unless you confront the past. And so I feel that as a people, as a Caribbean community, we do need to confront our past. And to do so, we need to be educated about what happened, the realities. There is a lot of misinformation going around. The fact that people will compare indentureship to slavery is a huge red flag. We cannot do that. Like we are, you know, we cannot do that. The fact that the Indian community in the diaspora will practice anti-Blackness without realizing it because it's so natural and so ingrained into us is a testament to the fact that we were put on a level above the formerly enslaved people, which indicates that we were not slaves. So we cannot compare ourselves to slaves. It's like the saying, at least we're not Black. And I've heard that in my community. And it speaks to the level of anti-Blackness, of racism, and how we cannot possibly like equate the two oppressive systems. Yes, both were horrible, and indentureship was absolutely horrible. No one is denying that, but we need to educate. We need to learn what the facts are, and we need to uproot those stories that are being pushed down and hidden and erased. And so I feel like that is one of the first major steps that need to happen in colonization. And I think a second one would be to with education comes, I think, understanding. And I think in places like Guyana, in Trinidad, where there is so much animosity and residual, I don't know, just the tension between the Africans and the Indians. There needs to be a coming together of these two major ethnic groups and come together in understanding of each other's history. We cannot move forward unless we understand what each other has gone through. And it was both horrible. We cannot keep fighting each other. We will never decolonize if we keep fighting each other. And I don't know how to get that done. It's a big ask. Mm-hmm. And I think what might help is the more people educate, the more people talk about it, the more people show solidarity with other ethnic groups, the more Indo-Caribbean people, the more people of indentured heritage, of Indian indentured heritage, the more we show solidarity with Black lives, with Black Lives Matter, we're going to be able to heal. I think that is part of the process. We need to understand each other. We cannot keep fighting. And furthermore, to that note, everyone who has been oppressed by the empires needs to come together in unity. There's a reason they divided us by race, by class. There's a reason they did not want us to unify, because they knew that we would reclaim our collective power as oppressive people and return to them and demand what is rightfully ours, demand our rights. And so I feel like these are all things that needs to be done in the decolonization process, but I don't have the answers. I'm not an expert, you know, I don't know. It's a very, very big thing, but I can only speak in my own personal journey, having to undo my internalized racism, to check my privilege, to make sure that I am acknowledging the ways that I uphold white supremacy and anti-Blackness. Even though I am an oppressed brown woman, I still uphold anti-Blackness and white supremacy 100%. For anyone to deny that, you're not looking deep enough. You're not understanding your history or your roots. And so I'm just speaking of my own journey and realizing that my present day solidarity with Black people and with people of all who have been oppressed has come with my own journey and undoing that internalized racism first, and then extending that to others, educating, and just using myself as an example for others to follow, because I do feel that people learn when there are examples, when there are visible, concrete examples for them to see, you know, tangible results. And I will never hide the fact that I was super ignorant. I was deep in the pits of white supremacy in my youth. I was very much indoctrinated to believe that as a Guyanese of from a British colony, that the British way, the white British way, was the right way. And so I grew up speaking British English, of course, having learned it in the colonies, but I thought like that was the right way. I thought that that was superior to our native Guyanese Creole, until I learned to reclaim our Creolese. And I thought that, you know, you needed to aspire to be like a British white person, because that was the, you know, that was how to be a proper, respectable human being in society. And I bought into it. I was an Anglophile. I'm pretty sure I was a monarchist. Like, you know, you're taught to believe that the royal family is this like thing that you're supposed to like laud and respect and uphold. And I bought into all of it up until I was about 2021. That is a long time. And then you realize, you learn, and you realize this is not it. We have been lied to, we've been hoodwinked, we've been indoctrinated. And then comes the work of unpacking all of that. And you sit with that discomfort and you do the work so that you can get to a point where you reclaim your identity, reclaim yourself, reclaim your ancestors, and learn to be proud of who you are in your skin. And then extend that further beyond yourself to help your community, and then to help other communities that you don't belong to, because we all have the same oppressor. We all have the same damn oppressor. And we need to come together so that we can finally like unify in the way that we need to take action and I don't know, work towards a better future that we all deserve regardless, you know? So that's how I see it.
Okay. So this leads us nicely into perhaps another podcast where we could talk about mental health and the legacy of colonialism, because a lot of what you've mentioned there has to do with a sort of mental battle of overcoming certain limitations and barriers that have been a legacy of that colonialism. So we can see how this is sort of received by the audience, and then talk about doing a sequel on mental health. That'll be brilliant.
Yeah.
So just to end then, so tell everybody how they can find you on social media and how they can get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Cooley Woman page I run on Instagram is Cooley, COOLIE.women, WOMEN. You can find me on Instagram and definitely reach out. I am always welcome and open to discussions and dialogues and learning new things from people of all backgrounds. We are not a monolith. We all have differing experiences, and I am not the spokesperson for the diaspora. I will never paint myself as that. We all need to learn from each other. So please follow and support and reach out to me and teach me something new. And I hope that whatever I learn, you will learn something new too. We're in this together.
Brilliant. And you can find us at the Association of Former British Colonies. That's ASSOC_former_British_colonies. And you'll be able to find us and enjoy our content. And we also repost a lot of Cooley Women's content as well, because it really fits into the education process that we are trying to facilitate as well. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions for us or any feedback you'd like to give us, we'd really appreciate this. This will be uploaded on social media for you guys to enjoy. So I hope you enjoyed it, and goodbye for now.